Gareth A. Davies, my man. How are you, sir?
I'm good. I couldn't work out what day it was last weekend, but this week, given that it's a Monday and now it's a Tuesday, I've managed to get back into it. But I've had a very quiet time for about a week and it's been amazing. But I'm ready for a blockbuster year. I heard the intro there. I'm ready for an even bigger blockbuster year this year. What about you?
Yeah, again, same like you. I just pressed the pause button. I went to Nigeria. I bumped into a former unified heavyweight champion of the world in Anthony Joshua. We had a nice conversation. He seems at peace, which is nice. Sometimes after a defeat like that, you kind of wonder where the head's going to be. I feel like time has been a good healer for him. And I think he said, and look, he's done interviews in Nigeria. I think they've now gone global, these interviews, saying he wants Tyson Fury. So he didn't mention Daniel Dubois. He didn't mention potentially jumping the line, the queue and fighting Alexander Usyk or a Martin Bakoli who's called him out. We'll speak about all those things. He said one man, and that one man was Mr. Tyson Fury. And I feel like once Tyson Fury licks his wounds, he's going to say Anthony Joshua. I feel like we might get it on. I feel like this could be the year.
Absolutely. First of all, was it serendipitous, your meeting with Anthony Joshua, or did you know he was going to be in the same place as you?
Random. I knew he was in Nigeria, and I did kind of stalk his Instagram a little bit. Like, where is he? Like, where? How can
So
I?
you were stalking him.
I kind of stalked him a little bit.
Professionally.
But then I went
professionally.
Yeah, of course. I was like, am I going to see this guy or not? Like, we're in Lagos, and although it's a big place, there are sort of a few party spots, if you like. And I was like, okay, he's going to be in one of these spots. Then I went to a place called Mako on my last night, and he was in there, and it was nice to see him. He looked a bit leaner. I don't know if he packs on the muscle for fights, but he looked a bit smaller than usual. But I almost feel like it was the perfect place for him to go and just get the love, because he was getting so much love. I mean, AJ gets love all over the world, but I do think once he goes back to Nigeria, he does seem to get showered with a lot of love from the Nigerian sports
very
fans.
Interesting. I see Francis Ngannou was out there, Israel Adesanya, Kamaru Usman. You saw all them as well, I take it?
I saw all of them. They were all out there. There was a big music festival out there. And obviously, everyone goes back to Nigeria sort of for January anyway, Christmas, January, but there was a big music festival out there. So I think most of them went out there for that. So yeah, we had a few big heavyweights in Nigeria over the new year, which was nice. 2024, last week we did our look back of last year. I asked you to score it out of 10. Do you remember what you said?
Yeah, 9 out of 10, definitely.
9 out of 10.
Definitely.
Yeah. Do you then, with what you can vision for 2025, do you feel like 2025 is going to be bigger? Like, could it be a 10?
I think a 10 is always going to be difficult to propose or even rewards or awards a year for, because there's so many things that can go sideways in boxing. But one of the reasons why I gave last year a 9, yes, undisputed heavyweight title, 2 of those in a sense, or certainly the 2 top heavyweights in the world fighting each other twice, many matchups being made, growth of the sport back to where it should be in lots of ways. Largely, I think, because the promoters are working together. Saudi Arabian investment, I think, is very, very good for the sport.
Yeah.
But it augurs well towards, one of the reasons I give a 9 out of 10 is that so much from last year sets up so many good things for this year.
All right, my wish list, and I guess this is really to crown maybe the fighter of the generation, if you like, the last, 15, 20 years. And I know there's whispers about it, and it seems to be shut down all the time, but I really do want to see Terence Crawford versus Canelo Alvarez. I know there's a weight discrepancy between the two, right? One at 154, one at 168, but something can happen there. Crawford desperately wants to fight. I believe Canelo wants it for the right money. There aren't that many fights out there now for Canelo because Benavidez and Morale have now gone up to 175, and he didn't really seem interested in fighting them. And I don't think there's any interest for Crawford to fight anyone else at 154 or 160. So it's the super fight of all super fights. And when you've covered the sport for nearly 30 years, you know nothing beats a big Vegas fight. Nothing. And this one would just sell out anything in Vegas, and it'll be enormous.
Yeah, unless Riyadh season want to own
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
But it could be a Riyadh season Vegas card. Look, I was there when Canelo, as a 23 or 24-year-old, fought Floyd Mayweather, who was much his senior then, into his late 30s, and it was an amazing occasion. The weird thing about Terence Crawford and Canelo Alvarez, and I agree with you on Canelo Alvarez has realised there's weight divisions for a reason. At 175 is just too much
Mm.
for him. Maybe he's been wise avoiding Morel and Benavidez. Maybe not. Maybe should have fought Benavidez already. This is a weird one because Crawford's older than
Yeah.
Canelo, even though he doesn't look like it, act like it, or feel like it. But Canelo obviously is an older guy in terms of the years he's put in, 20 years as a pro. So it's an extraordinary run. For me, I agree with you. I think it's one of boxing's big super fights because it harks back to Sugar Ray Leonard and Marvin
Mm.
Hagler. Leonard stepping up to the middleweight division and beating Marvin Hagler. Maybe it's a similar kind of fight in a way, without critiquing too heavily or comparing Canelo to one of my all-time heroes, Marvin Hagler. Obviously, one was a southpaw as well in Hagler. So I think it's a brilliant, big fight. I think it needs a lot of hype and promotion, even though it is probably one of the biggest fights on earth outside the heavyweight division. It probably is the biggest. But I'd love to see it, Ade. I'm 100% with you, and I think we will see
That
it
was
in
going to be my
2020.
next question. You actually think it does happen?
I
Yeah.
do. I really do. Don't you?
Yes, just because the options are running out for both of them. I do feel like if Bivol beat Beterbiev, I think Canelo would have tried the Bivol fight again. I think he would have tried to go for undisputed at 175, but he's not going to obviously want anything to do with Beterbiev. I don't blame him. And for Crawford, I mean, again, you look at the names at 154 and at 160. They're not sexy, are they? There's not no sexy big fights out there for him. Jamel Charlo could have been one, but he's gone MIA. And Errol Spence, we don't know what's going on with him as well. So I think both are running out of opponents. That's why I think it could happen.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think they're made for each other in a sense that the jeopardy is there with Terence stepping up. He looked fine against Israel Madrimov, very tough 154 fighter. That's the great thing as we go into this year. We can fantasize about fights we want to see, and there's a very good chance we will see them. And that's why boxing is in rude health right now. Don't listen to anyone who says, oh, the atmosphere is wrong in Saudi, it's diminishing boxing, it's quelling what should be, it's reducing boxing in other countries. You watch Japan or the Japanese fighters, people like Junto Nakatani, Naoya Inoue, Martin Bakole, Anthony Joshua, who you mentioned, or you didn't mention Bakole, but obviously he's pushing Anthony Joshua for a fight. Africa and Asia and China with Zhile Zhang haven't had big fights yet. But the ambition of Turkey Al Sheikh, as you know as well as I do, knows no bounds. And we're going to get all territories in the world, if there's an audience for it, being kind of inculcated into what is a new movement in the boxing world.
I said one wish. I'm going to be greedy here. This is my domestic wish, right? I mean, Crawford Canelo is a global, like, Super Bowl-esque fight, if you like. I am desperate just because we waited nearly 5 years now to see a Boatsi Yard fight. And this isn't disrespecting Callum Smith at all, because I actually think that's a 50-50 fight with him and Boatsi. I think it's a really good fight. But we've been waiting for Yard Boatsi Yard for years. It doesn't look like we're any closer, which is crazy considering that Yard is technically a free agent now. So I would love to see that one. That's another one domestically. And look, it's not as big as other fights, but I want to see that one.
Joshua Buatsi was on Fight Night with me and Adam Catterall on Saturday night. He said he's bearded. He said, I'm glad you can't see me because I look like a San Francisco tramp right now. I look like a homeless guy. You know what he does? Yeah. He shaves up beforehand. Our lovely friend from Croydon and Ghana, one of the great characters in British boxing, one of the most, I think, underspoken characters. We spoke to him about how he's set up. He's set up perfectly for 2025 because if Beterbiev and Bivol, who you mentioned Beterbiev, if Beterbiev and Bivol go 12 rounds again and Bivol edges it this time, which I'm anticipating, and they go to a trilogy fight, at the moment, Joshua holds is it the interim WBO?
Interim
something like that?
WBA, I believe.
I know. I think
Is
it's
it?
the
Okay,
WBO.
okay.
I correct you there because I know it's the WBO. But we could easily see if he beats Callum Smith again. I'm not writing Callum Smith off either. We could easily see he and Yard later on in the year contesting that WBO title, because at that point, Better Be Evan Bivol won't need all the belts. Be as simple as that. So something is going to fracture. So I think it sets up for a fantastic year for Joshua Buatsi as long as he can get past Callum Smith on February the 22nd in Riyadh, which I think opens the card.
It opens the card. Honestly, that alone is crazy. I mean, that's a main event over here on any other fight card, and it opens the card, which again shows you just how big that February 22nd fight card is. But look, good thing for Buatsi as well that he is turning around very quickly. Had that Willie Hutchinson fight on the Dubois AJ undercard, and now he's turning around and going straight into another big one. And that's one thing we've said he needs to be, and that's active. So it's a good thing that he's active as well. I love it. A couple of wish lists for myself and Gareth to start the year. All right, you're listening to Fight Night Extra on talkSPORT 2. Still to come, we are going to bring you our proper fight wish list for 2025. We just teased you a couple of things there. Also, we're going to pick out some fighters to keep an eye on this year. But up next, how does 2025 play out in the big boy division, the heavyweights? Welcome back. You're listening to Fight Night Extra on talkSPORT 2. Ade Oladipo, Gareth A. Davies. All right, let's talk the big boys. Alexander Usyk is the man right now. There is a young pretender called Daniel Dubois who's out there as well. You guys would have seen him jump in the ring and say to Alexander Usyk, let's get it on again, although he does have Joseph Parker coming up February 22nd. I want to start with the number one, right? One of the best heavyweights of all time, Alexander Usyk. What does he do next in 2025? Like, if you have your crystal ball there, your magic wand, who is Alexander Usyk fighting next?
I think he fights the winner of Daniel Dubois and Joseph Parker. And then later on in the year, if Jaya Pataya comes through David Nyika, tomorrow morning, which we'll all be watching. It's about midday, by the way. Tune in about midday tomorrow. Get your DAZN.
Go on, good little plug there. Yeah. I'll send you that fiver later.
You know what? I love a midweek midday fight. I mean, I'm really excited about it. I'm building my day around it tomorrow, even though I'm off to see Moses Talma as well. I'll be having the fight on. I'll be getting to Moses' gym early and then watching the fight, which is brilliant these days. What a great thing we've got now. You can just watch the fight on your phone live. Amazing. And then I think later on in the year, he fights Jaya Pataya at heavyweight after, if he can.
Jaya heavyweight. Jaya goes up.
Jaya Pataya at heavyweight. He walks around 215. Listen, that is a brilliant fight at heavyweight. I do not see. All right, can you see Alexander Usyk losing the 26 pounds to come down, or 23 pounds to come down? Or do you see Jaya Pataya putting on the weight and coming up? All the advantages are with Alexander Usyk, and he'll want those advantages. Look, if Alexander Usyk has one more against the winner of Dubois and Parker, and he decides to sail off as undisputed champion, belts twice, I think that's probably enough for him. But if he wants to carry on, that's my wish list for him for 2025.
Yeah, my wish would have been for him to have called it quits after the Fury fight. That would have been my wish. Like, okay, you know what? I become undisputed. We ran it back. I done you again. I dominated at cruiserweight. I've got a great amateur record. I'm going to be 38. I think he's 38 in like 4 or 5 days. I've done enough. Because even though the Opataya fight sounds nice and Dubois Parker sounds nice, they're not enormous. They don't sound like I can't wait to see these events. We've already had that with him. We had that with AJ, and we've had that with Fury. So I feel like he might be running out of like proper dance partners. And that's not to say there aren't great contenders out there in the heavyweight division. Martin Bakoli is going to be a name that's mentioned. But if Dubois does beat Parker, I don't know. I mean, it's a good fight. Don't get me wrong, Usyk versus Dubois, but we've already seen it. We have already seen it. I'd be more interested in the Opataya fight, weirdly enough, than the Dubois fight.
the thing is, what you could do with those, you could put Usyk. If Dubois looks spectacular against Joseph Parker, you could put that fight on at Wembley Stadium in the summer. It doesn't have to be in Riyadh season.
Is it that big? Is it that big? Wembley Stadium big?
I think Usyk's got a lot of followers here. You could put it on there. Ditto, you could put Usyk versus Opetaya on down under in a massive stadium as well, with 50,000 Australians that would love a big event. And I think as long as the hard thing for Alexander Usyk is, if you believe the amounts of money that he earned for fighting Tyson Fury, will he be able to get up for what you'd expect to be a lesser purse or a smaller purse for these other guys? But when you speak to Alex Krasiuk, and he would say this because he's his promoter, that there is an appetite for Usyk, for him as the man to carry on. It wouldn't surprise me either if he wakes up one day, like you say, he's 38 very soon, a couple of days' time, I think. It would not surprise me if he woke up this year and said, you know what, I'm done. I think it will come suddenly for Usyk where he feels like he's had enough.
Nearly 2 decades ago, or around this time, maybe slightly over 2 decades ago, a certain light heavyweight went up to heavyweight and became a heavyweight champion. Obviously, I'm talking about Roy Jones Jr. The reason I bring this to the table, there is a light heavyweight undisputed champion out there who has history with Alexander Usyk from the amateurs. I'm talking about Artur Beterbiev. Could we see Artur Beterbiev make the jump? Could we see Artur Beterbiev? Bear in mind, by the way, Alexander Usyk, as you know, weighs in at 222 pounds. Artur Beterbiev, without a shadow of a doubt, walks around that. He's enormous, Artur Beterbiev. Could we see Artur Beterbiev make a jump and fight Alexander Usyk? Is it too much? Is it too big?
Well, I've watched them boxing each other at the Olympics. I think it was in London 2012. It was fantastic. I think Usyk's too big for Beterbiev.
Yeah, he's too big. He's solid.
He's too big a guy for him. I mean, again, you're doing fancy
well, Turkey does it, so I can do it.
Yeah, but I think in terms of size, I'd love to see Beterbiev and Canelo fight each other. I think that's a fantastic, in terms of hands going.
I think Canelo would get honestly, it'd be like a nail to a hammer. Too strong. I think Beterbiev Opetaya is more realistic.
Again, I think there's a big difference in size, but again, fight I'd love to see.
There are some good ones. All right, let's talk about you mentioned at the top on your wish list the fight you really want to see this year, and that's Tyson Fury versus Anthony Joshua. I was in Nigeria, as you know. I spoke to AJ, and he's done so much media out there as well, and it's obviously come out that he says he wants to fight Tyson Fury. That's his number one aim. How realistic is this now? Is this now all systems go? Are there any barriers out there apart from egos and finances? Apart from that, any barriers out there to making AJ versus Fury?
Well, I think the only barrier is Fury agreeing to do the fight if he still feels he wants to carry on. I think what we saw after the Usyk defeat, the second one, was still a lot of strong dog in Tyson Fury. He felt he'd won the fight. He's very vehement afterwards that he felt he'd won it by a couple of rounds. Didn't agree with the scoring. Doesn't feel like he got beaten. I mean, I had it for Usyk narrowly. I think you did as well. It's Anthony Joshua's laid his cards on the table and said he wants that fight this year with Tyson Fury, and he wants the rematch with Daniel Dubois. I think we need the Fury fight first. So all it takes at this point, and I think it will be soon. We're only into the first week of January. It was only 2.5 weeks ago the fight took place. I think people will start to nurdle and nudge Tyson Fury about, whether he's interested or not. And I think we need to have that fight by June, July this year. Because if not, Joshua's been out of the ring since September. He'll want to get back into action. It's a brilliant summer fight. It's got to be Wembley Stadium for me, or Spurs maybe, because we've had big fights there. But it comes down to whether Fury wants it, because we know Joshua does, because Fury hasn't said he wants it yet.
I think with Fury as well, and it's difficult, right? Back-to-back defeats, but you've got to take heart from how close those defeats were to Alexander Usyk. I mean, again, everyone will focus on the first fight in round 9, But those were two close fights against what we're now saying is an all-time great. So there's no shame in those defeats at all. Whereas I feel like I'm surprised that AJ's run into it considering how his fight played out, but hopefully it happens. We've all been waiting for it. It's not as big as it would have been a couple of years ago, but it's still a very, very big fight. And it probably is financially the biggest fight that can be made in 2025. Can I ask you a couple of quick fire questions, Gareth? Who is the number one heavyweight, by the end of 2025, the back end of 2025, 31st of December 2025, who is the man in the heavyweight division?
I still think it'll be Alexander Usyk if he's fighting. If he's given up the ghost, it may well be Daniel Dubois.
Okay. I'm with you. I will say Alexander Usyk if he's fighting. If he's not, I don't know why. I just feel like Martin Bakoli will actually bury everyone.
I don't think he's going to get the opportunity.
This is the problem, isn't it?
He never gets the opportunity.
Yeah, he probably won't. All right, next one. Will Moses Itauma fight for a world title in 2025?
I think we'll all be wanting him to, but I think we're going to have to wait till into 2026 when he's reaching the age of 21. I don't think he's going to beat Mike Tyson's record by May. I don't think they can manufacture a way for that. He probably hasn't got enough experience. I could see him fighting a Filip Hrgovic this year. I could see him fighting another top 15 contender. But I think into 2026, we'll see him contesting a world title. And I think he'll be quicker, not than Mike Tyson, but he'll be quicker than Floyd Patterson at age 21 and 10 months when he won the world title, and quicker than Muhammad Ali to a world title at 22 years and 6 or 8 days, I think it is, providing everything continues as he's going.
See, my thing then, if Frank isn't going to push him to break the Mike Tyson record, which he's got until May, I think it is, then I think you just build him correctly and rightly. Then there's no rush at all. I wanted a rush just because of the story, right? You're breaking Mike Tyson's record. I wanted that. But if there is no Mike Tyson record, then I think they should and Frank does build these fighters slow. Do it. Take your time with him. Take your time.
No, not too long. Not too long.
21.
He just needs that experience of an 8-rounder or a 10-rounder where he's not having it all his own way. Once he's completed those things, we know how dangerous he is. We know how precise he is. We know he's a tricky southpaw. We know he creates angles. We know he's made a statement so far. We know that he's been very good at sparring the biggest men for almost 4 years now. I just think it's, like you say, I don't think the record matters. I'm just throwing it out there that there are very young, very formidable world champions who did it. As I say, Patterson was 21, Ali was 22, Mike Tyson was 20. It'll come when it comes. But we haven't seen him under pressure yet. And remember, anyone can knock anyone else out at heavyweight.
Yeah, no, you're correct. Well, one name very quickly we've not discussed is a man that had an incredible 2024, and that's Fabio Wardley. Right? I mean, he's almost the guy on the outside looking in. He's not been spoken about. I almost feel like everyone speaks about Moses a lot more, maybe because he's younger and looks like he's the future. Fabio, I feel like, is going to have some interesting fights in 2025. He wants a world title. He's very high in all the governing bodies. I think he could get a crack at a vacant belt potentially, or even just a big name in 2025.
Absolutely. Listen, he's one of the... I'm looking at the world boxing rankings here at heavyweight. At the moment, I think you've got to put him in the top 10, just inside the top 10. An amazing year. I mean, we don't want to necessarily want to remember that horrific knockout of Fraser Clark late in the year. Horrible moment. But he had an amazing year. He showed the dog in himself in that first fight with Fraser Clark. He's an incredible boxer who's only getting better. And you've got to look, he's ranked number 1 challenger for the WBA at the moment. Did you know that?
I didn't know it was that high. That's what I'm trying to say.
He's
he
ranked
needs to be
number
about.
1. 7-7 So I was looking up 7-7 with the WBC and the WBO, and 9 with the IBF. There's a dark horse for a world title shot in 2025.
Incredible story, incredible.
Or
By the way,
in
good to hear.
2026.
You mentioned Fraser Clark. They're very good to hear that he's back in training. I'd like to see him sit out a bit longer, considering that punishment he took in that second fight. But he's back in training. He wants some big fights. Maybe Fraser Clark versus David Adeleye in 2025. All right, you're listening to Find It Extra on talkSPORT 2. Ade Oladipo and Gareth A. Davies. Up next, we're going to bring you our fight wish list for 2025. Welcome back. You're listening to Find It Extra on talkSPORT 2. Ade Oladipo, Gareth A. Davies. All right, 2025 wish list. All right, let's start with a fight that Eddie Hearn said he's obviously down under for the Jaya Pattaya fight. He says, we're running out of time to make this fight, and I am talking about Conor Benn versus Chris Eubank Jr. Simple question. Will we see it? Will this fight happen in 2025? Conor Benn is posting stuff saying he's, WBC locked and loaded for the welterweight title. Eubank hasn't really said much in the last few weeks. Will it happen?
Well, if it doesn't happen, it's down to ridiculous egotism, in my view. It's a massive fight for both of them. Bloodlines, lineage, all the advantages are with Chris Eubank Jr., frankly. And the fact he's demanding 55-45 is ridiculous. Just go 50-50 and just make a big fight that we'll all enjoy. Again, as I say, I make him favourite, but Conor Benn's got great opportunities early in the fight to try and take it to Chris Eubank. Yes, I do think we'll see it, because it will be idiotic almost of them, if you can say that, of a fight. It's up to them what they want to do.
No, I think you're right. Idiotic. I think it's correct.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense if this fight doesn't happen because one person wants 5% or 10% more.
It's funny because, normally I agree with you when it comes to anything about Conor Benn, Chris Eubank Jr., but I'm almost like looking at Conor saying, just take 45. I'm thinking, just take 45. Look, what's the problem?
Well, he may eventually. He may take 45.
I think I heard. I think Napa, who sort of works alongside Chris Eubank Jr., I think they proposed a deal where was it? I can't remember what it was. Was it 40-40 and the winner takes the 20 or something? And I think Eddie said he's going to tell Conor. But look, if I'm Conor, I've been out the ring for so long. His last fight I covered in America in Vegas, and that was last year, December, I believe. I mean, if Eubank Jr. giving you 45, you take it, especially considering how the fight fell off last time. It wasn't Eubank Jr.'s fault. So I think Conor should take the 45, but we'll see. I do think it happens. I think it's just too much money involved for both of them to say no.
Yeah, and a 2-fight deal depending on what happens in the first fight. Because if it's a great first fight, let's have a second fight.
All right, what we do know about great first and second fights is Katie Taylor versus Amanda Serrano just seem to produce and produce and produce. I mean, they could fight at 60 and it would still be a good scrap. Now, a lot of people have been calling for number 3 just because number 1 was controversial, number 2 was controversial. Although if you're Katie, you're thinking, well, 1 second, it's 2-0 me. It's 2-0 me. But I'd love to see a third fight. I'd love to see it in Ireland. What say you?
Well, it'll be on the undercard of Jake Paul and whoever he fights next, I imagine. That's what I don't disagree with you, but I imagine it will stay under the umbrella of most valuable promotions. 2 terrific fights. I thought Serrano was incredible with that cut, that gash above her eye, and I thought she took the fight, but obviously it's 2-0 to Taylor, but it's still worthy of a trilogy fight. It's brilliant. Also, adding to that, by the way, another women's fight. Had them on the show with me live on Saturday night here at talkSPORT Towers. Lauren Price and Natasha Jonas. That is a brilliant fight early in March at the Royal Albert Hall.
Yeah, incredible fight, that one. It really is. I mean, Tasha's what, 40? 40 in insane shape, and that is going to be a good one as well. So good luck to both ladies. If Katie doesn't fight Amanda, and look, it might not happen. I mean, look how long it took to get the rematch, right? If she doesn't fight Amanda, where do you think Katie goes? Like, I've been calling for Katie to retire for years. Obviously, that's just me. I think after the first Amanda fight, I was like, okay, that's it. You're done. You achieved everything you wanted to achieve. She still had a few more fights and some good wins. Chantel Cameron being the obvious one. Where does she go if not Amanda Serrano?
Well, I've mentioned Tasha Jonas there. There's Alicia Baumgardner. Anyone in that grouping of Chantel Cameron, Alicia Baumgardner, Tasha Jonas. There's so many, great fights there for her. But I do think she'll stick to Serrano because they are such incredible dance partners. And I think Serrano deserves it and Taylor deserves it. And the fact that 65 million people watched it live on Netflix, I think we'll see
So
it
many
again.
big money fights potentially in 2025. I think the obvious one, obviously, is AJ Fury. I think Canelo Crawford does or gets very close to 1 million pay-per-view buys. That's the magical number, right? Another one that I think gets very close, if not goes over it, is Devin Haney versus Ryan Garcia. Because of how the first fight played out, and controversy sells, right? And this one has sold. Devin Haney is suing Ryan Garcia as we speak.
For assault.
Yeah, he's suing him.
It's a very odd one. You kind of get it. The
No, I get it.
semantics of assault. But at the same time, isn't this is what boxing is?
I somehow though feel like fighters might start doing this. Like if you fight someone and they fail a drugs test, I feel like fighters might take it upon themselves to, not go to the governing bodies and do it themselves and sue the fighters. I actually weirdly think this could work.
It's a landmark case, there's no question about it. But isn't there an admission here that he's been irreparably damaged by that first fight? That he's not the same person? They've expunged off the records that this fight no longer exists, i.e. what you watched, the build-up of Ryan Garcia, the Emperor's Clothes, Pirandello and Enrico Il Quarto, taking us all along on the storyline. I won't bore you with the Italian playwrights play, but Henry IV pretends he's gone mad, and all his courtiers believe him. They go along with the story, and then he whips his clothes off and says, "Here I am. I was having you on all the time," which is what Ryan Garcia did. But he didn't make the weight. He tested positive afterwards for banned substances. So it's a mired mass of mess around what was probably the biggest boxing match of the year in America, boxing match. Outside Jake Paul and Mike Tyson, but which was obviously a hugely attended, massive money spinner. But the fight's expunged; it doesn't exist anymore. But by trying to have a court case for assault, which is landmark, isn't Devin Haney saying, "I'm so damaged by this, I'm never going to be the same man again"? So I'm fascinated to see them step into the ring again together because it's an enormous.
Yeah, I think
fight.
Devin Haney's like, you embarrassed me. Now pay me. You've embarrassed me. You embarrassed me in front of the world. I want to get paid. And there was so much behind the scenes as well about neither fighter getting paid what they allegedly got paid. Right? They didn't get as much money as they thought they were going to get. And I think Devin Haney's like all about his money. I think Eddie said this recently. He's all about his money. If he thinks he can somehow get an extra couple of million from Ryan Garcia's pockets, he will do so. Again, it's a landmark case. It can be very interesting to see how this plays out. But I think it's a huge fight in 2025. I really do.
Can I also add Devin Haney to another fight I'd like to see in 2025, and that's with Teofimo Lopez. I'd love to see Haney and Lopez. And also, I would like to see Gervonta Davis and Shaka Stevenson step into a ring together because I think that's on my wish list.
That's almost been removed from my wish list. It's strange. My wish list is almost fights that I genuinely believe could happen. I've got to the stage with Gervonta Davis where he said he's going to retire. And by the way, his fight with Frank Martin looks like it could be off. Like no one's even speaking about that. Gervonta's completely removed his social media.
No, Frank Martin was last
apologies.
year.
Lamont Roach. Sorry. Lamont Roach. It is
Lamont Roach. Yeah. Lamont
I
Roach,
think that fight's done. I just don't think Gervonta has any interest in fighting that much anymore. But if not,
I think he will fight. I love the new hairdo as well.
Yeah. Look, I think he's fantastic for boxing. I think he's a great character.
He is.
There is a mini Mike Tyson about him, which I love.
Yeah.
But he's the king of deciding who he wants to fight. And if he's not fought Shakur, if he's not fought Devon, it's all down to him. Everything's down to him. So hopefully we get those ones. We touched on it briefly at the top. But I do think we should speak about it again. Canelo versus Crawford has to be top of anyone's wish list. Yeah, I mean, it really
Absolutely
does. Fights that move the needle. This one just brings two completely different demographics in one African American, one Mexican. I think it's the fight to crown the fighter of the generation. I really do think.
And Vegas, I think, the Raiders Stadium in Vegas would be the place.
Do you think it could
Yeah,
be a Riyadh season event? Is that the only way
probably.
it
Yeah,
gets
I think
made
so.
financially?
Yeah, Riyadh season, Raiders Stadium in Vegas.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah,
big one as well.
ringside, please, baby.
Well, knowing you will be. All right, final one very quickly. Inoue, and everyone's been begging for him to fight outside of Japan, which is unfair, right? Because he does so many good things in Japan. This guy sells at stadiums. I want to see Bam take the step up. I really do. I want to see Bam. It's two weight classes apart, and so I know it's a lot. But I mean, we're talking a hamburger. I mean, we're talking a couple of pounds here. We're not talking jumping 30 pounds. We're talking a hamburger. Can these two just get it on, please? That's the super fight. I know Nakatani's out there, but in terms of a super fight, which brings in the American audience as well, as opposed to just an Asian fight, I think Inoue versus Bam at some stage, it's a bit of a dream. It's a bit of a wish list, but I'd love to see it happen.
Yeah, you're being very
Why not?
fanboyish there by not giving them their full names. I'm going to cross the T's and dot the I's. Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez, a modern, tiny, bespectacled, growing giant against the monster himself, Naoya Inoue, who's fighting in front of 50,000 people in Japan at the moment. That's a brilliant crossover fight. Probably they could do that at bantamweight. I think
Yeah.
probably. Even super bantam would be fine. It's like you say, it's a couple of crusts
There
of
you
bread
go.
and the difference in weight there. In many ways, though, I think I mentioned him last week. Junto Nakatani had a brilliant 2024, up to 118 pounds, 3 victories, all under 6 rounds, all by
Someone's
knockout.
done his research.
Nakatani and Inoue, that's a massive fight in the land of the rising sun for me as well.
Big fight. It is a big fight, but it's a big fight in the land of the rising sun as opposed to the world. And I want to see Bam. We'll see what happens. Anyway, some good fights to be made. All right, you're listening to Fight Extra on talkSPORT 2. Next up, we're going to pick out some fighters to watch in 2025. Welcome back. You're listening to Fight Extra on talkSPORT 2. Ade Oladipo, Gareth Davies. All right, let's talk about the fighters to watch in 2025. Now, this might come as a surprise, the name I'm going to mention first, but I'm still so intrigued by him. I still think there is a superstar there. I haven't given up. I'm not out of the fan club of Ben Whittaker. I think Ben Whittaker is one to look out for. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of Liam Cameron fans here saying, "Oh, steady, Eddie. 1 second. Liam Cameron pretty much beat him in his last fight, and he probably was on his way to doing so." But I still feel like if Ben can get it right, we need people like Ben in boxing. We need those showmans in boxing. And I feel and hope he gets it right in 2025. So I'm going to be eagerly watching, eagle-eyed on Ben Whittaker.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good call. I mean, he's got to have a rematch with Liam Cameron, right the wrongs of what happened out in Riyadh when they both fell over the very loose top rope and he was unable to walk out of the ring, out on a wheelchair, wasn't he, at the time? He's got an enormous amount of flack for that.
Ridiculous amount.
But it will probably be the making of him in lots of ways. A lot of controversy. Yes, there are more questions than there were answers, but I think he'll answer them in the next year.
And he needs to sort out his training situation. Those that know that he was with Sugar Hill Stewart. And his last couple of fights, he wasn't. And you could arguably say that those last couple of fights have been his worst performances, Liam Cameron and Ezra Aranyeka before that, which wasn't good either. So maybe he needs to look at that situation. And hopefully once that cleans up, we will see the best Ben Whittaker. All right, a superstar, no doubt, in my eyes. And if he becomes world champion in 2025, then I think he's just going to go boom. And I'm talking about Hamza Shiraz, who has everything. He has the look, speaks well, can fight. I think we know that. Just seems to tick every single box. And I just think he's sort of just superstar dusters all over him.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, he's not an outrageous character or personality at all. He's not Nassim Hamed. He doesn't come alive when the cameras go on him. He's about dedication and craft and his art. Great family background. His father, Cameron's always with him. He's an ambassador for Riyadh season. Like you say, he's all about discipline and art. I spoke to him recently, and he's in my book, Call of the Warrior. And he feels like a gladiator of old.
Yeah.
And I love that about Hamza. Big test for him on February
big
the 22nd now in Riyadh on that amazing card against Carlos Adames. But this is his time to shine.
Big test. Adam Azim has been speaking a lot. Obviously, coming off a really good win against Ahara Davies, has a fight coming up. He says he wants to be world champion in 2025. My only concern for Adam is that I think he will want the fights in 2025. I think that his team might look at the landscape of 140 pounds and slow it down a little bit, because once you go past a certain level, you're then in shark-infested waters, and every single fight is tough. I think we saw that of Liam Parra versus Richardson Hitchens. So he might be ready for it, but I feel like his team might wait until some of the old guard, Teofimo Lopez, have moved up a division and gone away.
Yeah, Ryan Garcia, Teofimo Lopez, Devin Haney, Gervonta Davis, anyone you want to put, you can put him in that division. There's so many great fighters, like you say, that around that 10 stone that, the big fight for him that we all wish for. And obviously this guy fights in the first few weeks of the year as well on a different card. Dalton Smith, Adam Azim and Dalton Smith probably need to meet like George Groves and James DeGale did all those years ago when they were at British, European and Commonwealth level. So world champion he wants to be by the end of this year. Last year, will he be a world champion by the end of this year? Maybe. We shall see. But the jury's still out on what he's going to be like at the very elite level. Obviously, Shane McGuigan talks about him in wondrous terms, as he would do. But we shall see in 2025. It's a big year for both of those guys, Dalton Smith and Adam Azim. Can I just throw a couple of names out there? I agree with you. I think it's a really big year for Richardson Hitchens in 2025, by the way. A big year for Diego Pacheco. I've been making a few names here. A big year for Eduardo Nunes, 27-1. Yeah, I think he's super bantamweight with 27 knockouts. If we're talking about guys who are going to rise and make a name for themselves, lightweight Abdullah Mason looks a brilliant puncher with top rank, 16-0 with 14 knockouts. And also Kermel Moton, promoted by Floyd Mayweather. He's only 6 fights in. He's a welterweight. Really like the look of him. And closer to home, because I want to get these names out there, George Liddard, the middleweight, who's 10-0, 22 years old, and Sam Noakes, who's crept into relevance under Frank Warren and looks better and better and better, 16-0 with 14 knockouts. I just wanted to throw some new names out there because there's a whole panoply of guys coming through right now in a very rich time.
Yeah, a couple of interesting names there. I thought Diego Pacheco was an interesting one. I mean, Eddie signed him a few years ago, right? He needs to go, doesn't he? We need to see something from him. The problem is there's a certain Canelo who's holding up the division and all the belts. That's the issue for everyone at 168.
Yeah, that's so right.
It's such a big problem. But you're right about George Liddard. I've covered a few of his fights, obviously, from Matchroom. He's got a lot of support as well. Sam Noakes, great fighter. So you are correct. All right, final one before we wrap the show. Currently, there are only 2 British male world champions. Crazy. Daniel Dubois and Nick Boyle. That's all we've got. That's it. I ain't got nothing else. I remember there was a time when we had 16. We have 2. How many will we have by the end of the year? Just a guessing game. God, don't think too much. Just a guessing game.
3. You can add Hamza Shearer.
Yeah. Okay, all right. We are filming this January 7th, by the way. All right, 3. I'm with you. I don't think we'll have much more, to be honest with you. Maybe 4. I'm going to say 4. All right, you've been listening to Fight Night Extra on talkSPORT 2. Big thanks, as always, to Gareth. Remember, if you've missed any of this show, you can listen to it as a podcast. Find it under the Fight Night banner on the talkSPORT app, on YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast from. We will be back next week.
On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app, and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.